How do you define creativity?
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm doing it really, really well.
Thank you for joining me. I'm like actually really excited about this episode because you're the first writer I've had on, like, you know, professional writer, author.
Yeah.
And I think that writing is like the most important part of the creative process, but it's also like the most underrated.
Yes.
I know you can speak more on that, like from your point of view, but like from an outsider looking in, it's like that's like the inception of every idea. Like you have to put it on paper, you have to write it out, even if it's like an Instagram caption or anything, like to portray a story. So like I've been kind of the last couple of years trying to get better at that and like and more into it. So I'm excited to like I'm probably gonna have like maybe some dumb questions or like a lot of questions, but I just think it's so important. It's often like overlooked. Like, I don't know if you agree or.
I feel like writing is totally the seed of everything. And I think people don't realize how from nothing it comes. Meaning like there's, information out there and then there's creation. And that's a totally different thing. You know what I mean? So it's like, you making a thing from scratch, a story that you're bringing, like that whole thing is such a process that you do by yourself. No one sees you do it. You know what I mean? I feel like it's one of those few things that truly, because it's all happening in your head, nobody can actually see it happen. And so it's like really hard for people to understand and put a value on it until you have an outcome, and you can't have an outcome until like many years later.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think completely it's underrated by some. I think other people like worship it, which is interesting. It has that double thing going.
Every little industry kind of has that.
Yeah. But you do, I feel like when you really, I live and breathe writing. Like this is what I do, and I've been doing it my whole life, And when you see, like, people have a hard time writing, like a really hard time writing, and you see it and you're like, okay.
Because it's like you're literally expressing your thoughts, but trying to put them down into something concrete. Yeah. Which sounds kind of like, it's just what you're thinking or what you're coming up with, but it's actually like very difficult. Yeah. And then like you said, like you could lay the foundation to something great, but then like you don't see it maybe months, years later, and it's like not. It is yours, but then it's like taking on this whole thing that like everyone praises. Yeah. But they're like kind of forget about, like, if it wasn't for me, this wouldn't even exist. Like no one would know what to say.
A decade later, when whatever the movie finally comes out or the this or the that, it's very.
So
very
what made you want to get into writing? Because it is kind of like a difficult career.
It's really funny because I've always written. My grandfather, I feel like in my house, it was always something that was very much something that we did. Like my grandfather taught me Shakespeare when I was like 10 years old, literally, like just normal, brought it off the shelf. And I was always a writer. And then the thing that I actually chose to do professionally, though, I did two things at the same time, which was painting and writing. And painting has a massive overhead. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you have to carry the shit with you.
Yeah. I mean, we see.
And I was like, every time I move, I have to carry all this stuff. And I would make these giant paintings, like huge, And I feel like I'm a very, very visual person, but that stuff has moved into the writing. But there was a moment in my life where the thing that was actually paying me were articles that I was writing. Like I was writing, and that was paying me and actually letting me live. And I was like, and I can do this from anywhere. So there was a moment in my 20s that I made a decision to put aside painting, which was kind of hard at the time. And I always think I like see myself like, in a few years getting a studio at some point and like going back to it, but with peace, Yeah. In a different way. But I chose to go down the writing path professionally, and it was paying me. It was letting me live. I could do it from anywhere. And I felt like it had a very profound depth that could truly change the world. Like it really can. It can do that. Words change people's minds all the time, every day. We don't realize it does. It really, they change people's minds. And it had such tremendous power with seemingly so little, but it's actually a lot that you have to have the control and like power over. So I went down that path.
And how does one like get into writing? Like, obviously you had a passion towards it, but like the traditional route is you go to school to study writing, but I know some people that don't even do that. Yeah.
I did way too much school, but I did way too much school, and I thought at some point, like after college, I thought I wasn't gonna do like even graduate school. Yeah. Like, so my path specifically was, my undergraduate was art history and English, with focuses in visual arts and writing, right? And then after that, I worked for a writer. I was living in New York City. I graduated the year of 9/11. So it was a tough year to graduate college in New York City. Wow. Yeah, it was insane. And I was like, okay, so I got a job with someone who had been my professor. He reached out to me and he was like, he is a well-known British writer. And he was like, do you want to work for me? And I was like, doing what? And he was like, my assistant, he had always had an assistant. I had always seen that. And I was like, oh, I would be terrible at that. I would suck at that. Like, that would be the worst. I am so bad at that stuff, right. And I said no. And he was like, well, there's always the future. And I was like, okay. And I wrote Spark notes. I did all kinds of barbaridades. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yes, I did crazy things.
Actual. I always wonder who wrote those. Ding. Wow, I lived off of that in college. You probably read some of mine. Wow, that's a thankless job right there. Spark notes, man. Dude, that was not a job. I could only do that for a limited time. But then I went back, like he called me at some point again. He was like, if you ever want to sit down and see what this actually entails, let me know. And I was like, okay. So I went to lunch and he was like, look, it's basically my research assistant and this and that. And essentially I said yes. And it became the apprenticeship of a lifetime. I went to Bellagio, Italy, to Ghana. I did so many things and I learned to live like a writer. I learned what it meant to actually like live a life as a writer. At some point I had to like stop working for him and go actually be my own writer. You know what I mean? But then in that moment, like while I was working for him, he was like, he always hung out with a bunch of guy writers, they were all men and like kind of like big macho 20th century kind of guys. Yeah. And they were like, you don't have to go to grad school. You're like a writer. You just be a writer. And that was a whole thing at a time. And I was like, eventually I figured out that I did have to go to grad school if I wanted to keep getting funded to write, getting, if I ever wanted to teach, I needed and get paid a decent salary. So I did end up at grad school and then I got a PhD. So this is what I'm telling you. At the end of the day, I got too much education. But it gives you more options. Yeah. But it's interesting because like that's like when I hear about writers, like in my mind, I like romanticize it of like those living that lifestyle where you're traveling, you're on the ground and you're writing, you're like the Hunter S. Thompson or like you're doing drugs, cigarettes, 8 a.m. writing, and it's like how does one live like that? But it's also very I'm interested in it. How does someone get to that point? Because like you said, you could do all this education or you could just write. But I think those experiences is like what kind of sets you apart from. And it's both, I think. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's like at the same time, there is a lot of that, like my life, anyone who knows me, like I feel like I'm pretty quiet and reserved on a regular, but I also have this thing where like my fear disappears when I'm working on something. So I just like plunge into something. And I think that comes from reporting because you just go. I was actually talking today about, do you remember the first cruise ship that left to Cuba after like 50 years of not? There was a cruise ship that left from here. And at that point I was like, I want to go and report on this.
And I also want to go and not be a journalist on it, because the journalists would go on the ship and then they would be taken to like the Teatro no sé qué once they got to Havana, and then shipped back, essentially flown back. But I wanted to go on the whole trip that nobody knew what I was doing, and like I wanted to really receive what was actually happening. So I did that the whole time, and then I wrote about it after. And like the journey from like, I think writing articles for $50, literally, to saying, I'm going to pitch a story. I want to go undercover on this thing, and then you're going to pay me after to do this. You know what I mean? So that I can go do and like, you're going to, that is kind of super exciting to go through all that. It's exciting in retrospect. While you're doing it, it's like, Jesus Christ. You know what I mean?
But like when that specific example you just gave, like when you pitch something like that, a project, are you even guaranteed that you might get paid for that? Even if it's like not good in their eyes? So
they have something called a kill fee.
Oh, okay.
If you're in that space already, like if they're like, we'll take it on spec, that's different. That's like total speculation, and that's like you submit it, and if we like it, that's a different thing. But if they take a pitch, they're saying, yes, we're taking it. We're paying you this much. You sign a contract. And then if it's horrible and they hate it, there's a kill fee. So you'll always get something.
So you also said like you kind of, when you're in your work, your fear kind of evaporates.
Yeah.
Like, where do you think that comes from? Like because I always, when I'm trying to research like writing exercises or like things to do, it's always like, just start writing, like don't worry about it. But it's like I'm one of those people where I'm like, on the first sentence I'm just like, this is terrible, and then I'm just like, maybe tomorrow, or like, but you just dive in.
I feel like you can't judge anything at all. That first shitty first draft, you have to go like, just the whole thing has to get it's like, I always think there's two kinds of writers. There's the ones that like throw a bunch of clay on the table and then they start to chisel it away and like start to mold it. But at first it's like a big pile of, it's like, what's that? But it's there. Yeah. You just have to kind of carve around it. You know what I mean? It's like, there it is. At least it's there.
There's an idea there.
Yeah. And then there's other writers that like take the little scroll and they put in one and then the other one and then the other one and then the other one. That's not me. I like put it all and then I start to take away.
And even because you've done, Spark Notes, but you've done almost a little bit of everything, right? Books, Spark Notes, journalism pieces, movies, or I'm sorry, plays,
novels,
kids
so like books, Sesame Street.
So you just kind of get like, I was interested in like the process before you start. Like, are you just writing because you have this idea, or you're trying to get somewhere in your head, or how much does like the thought of what works affect like the ideation process? Like you're feeling this, but you kind of know if you tweak it, this could kind of end up in the right hands or in the right person might like it, but in your heart you're like, but that's kind of not what I'm going for. Or like, do you think of that when you're writing?
I feel like every time in the past where I've ever tried to craft something for someone else, it's always a disaster. You know what I mean? Like that's never gonna work. I can only speak from my experience.
Right.
But I feel like at least me, like I write because I have something to say. There's something that's calling me. There's something that's pulling me. Like there's something, it feels endless. It feels like there's so much to write about in so little time. I have like so many things that I need to tackle, but I'm in this place right now where I'm like, finish this, then go to the next, and then go to the next, But I feel like it's interesting because when you're talking, something's happening in my head where there's like two different things to say in response to that. One is like, every time you write for someone else, it's a disaster. However, that doesn't mean that you're not smart about crafting, because that is craft, like meaning.
Right.
If you have an idea and you know that someone's going to understand it better, if you edit it a certain way, then that's just craft. Do you know what I mean? Like,
you're delivering the same message, but towards their
like they can hear it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like so much of writing is like, can you hear me? Can you hear this? Do you understand this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if it doesn't resonate with someone, they're just not going to understand the story. But if you craft it in a way.
Yeah. And so it's like you're always finding the better way to say it, finding the better way to say a thing, finding the better way to say a thing. And I feel like one of the big journeys is finding the simpler way, which feels like a lot of times people are like, oh, you know, like good writing is like this big flowery thing, which like sometimes it comes out like that beautifully. And, you know, that's what happened as a result. But I think getting the point across simply in a way is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like it can be so beautiful.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you might read it back and you're like, but that's not, it doesn't like, it's not sexy. It's just like, it's simple, but it does get the message across.
Yeah.
But like, at least when you started off, like, is there, like when you do have, I guess, quote unquote work for hire, like, do you have to kind of, you are writing for someone or some entity instead of like, but you kind of give your.
Yeah. I feel like for like Sesame Street, obviously the character of Elmo, you're not going to rewrite Elmo. You know what I mean? Elmo exists. He's there. He has been created, you know? So like your job is to write in his voice, in the voice of this character using a Bible that has already been created. And you bring your own, you know, flair to that piece. So like a lot of the times the things that I've been given on Sesame Street are things having to do with like culture or like food and culture. And so it's clear that it's like something that I can write about through these characters, you know, or they're interacting with someone new, or they're interacting with one of the Latin Muppets, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's a combination, but you can't change the machine.
You're right, exactly.
You know?
How do you write for Sesame Street?
The way that I got into it was I got into a thing called the writer's room at the Sesame Workshop. It was a fellowship, and they essentially bring people on in order to bring what essentially started out as like diverse voices, because the kids industry, they wanted to like make sure that people were represented and all of that. And so I applied and I got it and it was awesome. And then from there, what they do is they open the database of all kids TV to you. And they're like, here you go. Here are all the people in kids TV, which is super generous because like Sesame Street essentially incubates you. And then they're like, but go work for, you know, I went to Caillou and all these other places and like worked for a French show. You know what I mean? Like all this. And then I've worked for Sesame. But like they do that for the greater, like they're really an awesome.
And they're like
awesome
a prestigious
organization.
Establishment in itself. Like Sesame Street is like
they're super cool.
The OGs.
Yeah. They're really, really cool.
But like literally, how do you write for Sesame Street? Like how does that process like, because I mean they are like Muppets and like characters, and it's like how do you kind of make that connection?
So I have kids. Two things. The first time, like I just to go back to like the OG thing really quick, like the first time I walked into the Sesame Workshop and like there was like this mural of Big Bird and then eventually like sat in Oscar's trash can. Wow. Like I have to say like I got watery eyes. It's like, you know, like because you're like, what? I'm in Oscar's. I'm like, I am the Grouch right now. This is crazy. And you're like, oh my God. So that is like a super, super cool thing. I'm never gonna forget those moments. Yeah. But I have kids now. And I feel like having kids is so helpful in terms of writing for kids because there's the difference of remembering your own childhood, which is, I think when I started writing for kids, I was remembering my own childhood. And I realized how different that is than now, where I'm like, oh, I have a direct line. Exactly. Like to how they actually talk, which is hilarious. But you realize how much of TV and movies are influenced by that. Oh, dude.
Yeah. We talk about that all the time. Like this guy was raised on TV. Like it's
amazing.
So that guy, and now that I have a daughter, like, you know, because people are always talking about like how much TV should they watch, and I'm like, as long as you're watching the right stuff, like I feel like it's almost a little. I mean, obviously a little too much of everything is you know, but like if you're watching the right stuff, it helps shape that creativity. That like you're looking at things differently. Like you know, you're not just reading a book or going outside all the time. It's like you're seeing these weird characters like interact and stuff. So,
how old is your daughter?
she's about to be 2.
Oh,
Yeah. But it's true. Like you start to see the world through them.
Yeah.
And it's like different. You're like, wait a minute. I thought my childhood was like this, but
yeah,
she seems like she's liking this or not liking that. And
yeah, they're all different.
yeah, it opens your eyes.
Yeah.
So like when you're writing, like, do you have not ritual, but like a routine, or you just dive right in, or do you have to have like things set up, or?
So I used to have I used to write always. My thing was like I woke up very early and I wrote before 9 o'clock, meaning like 5 to 9 or that was always what I did until I had kids. And then now I'm like, I write anytime and anywhere I can on whatever, wherever. And that is a real thing. Like today I can tell you that I wrote like at 3 different moments. One was sitting down in a normal place, like a table for like my kitchen, like in my living room. I was there for a couple of hours in the morning and I was writing and it was really calm and it was like my favorite way, you know, and it was like, I
mean, that's the best way. Yeah.
And then another one was in my car and another one was in my car. Both of the other 2 were in my car, just 2 different parking spots. You know what I mean?
Because it's funny because like before you have kids, you're used to like having that time and like your whole setup and like your little coffee and this and that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I had my daughter, I had to like get over that. Like, no, everything has to be perfect so I can start work or I can whatever. Like now it's just like literally like I whip out my laptop in the car. Like if I'm in a parking lot or whatever, like you gotta take advantage.
Yeah.
But does that affect like your creative flow, or are you just like?
No, for me, no. I think kids completely cut the BS. They're like, it makes you cut like you're like, yeah, no. No and no. We're doing this. That's it. Like, you know, it literally makes you realize that's not important. That's not important. And then, of course, I'm oversimplifying because there's obviously the moments where you're like, ah! It all explodes in your face and you're like, oh my God. But for the most part, I think they help you cut through the fat.
Yeah, I always tell people it's a life hack.
Yeah.
Because you think you're not going to have time, but then you realize, oh, I actually had so much time and I was bullshitting. Because now you literally don't have time to be like doing anything that's not, you know, important.
Yeah.
But how do you do you ever get burnt out of writing? Because I can see myself like just because you're just sitting and writing thoughts. It's like you're in your head.
I don't think I'm ever, I don't believe in writer's block. I think that it's it's just about writing. You just write. It's not that you're gonna write something good every time, but like writing, you just do it. But I don't think I would burn out from writing. Like burnout from life is another animal, you know? Like I think I have come to the realization now, like I was like yesterday, days old. Like they say, you know, like literally recently, that sleep is important, you know?
Yeah.
Like I used to not do it and that really burned me.
Yeah.
It came to a point where I was like, oh, I'm being very unhealthy. And now I'm like older and I feel it and I have to sleep now. Like sleep is a thing. That's
so true. I'm still struggling with that. Because I always think like, oh, but like now is a good time because everyone's asleep, this, so you can work. And I'm in my head, I'm always like negotiating. I'm like, yeah, but like if I go to sleep at 12 or 1, what's the big deal? I wake up, you know, but I get all this extra stuff done. Yeah. But I keep telling myself like, yeah, but you're waking up not as like 100% because you're going to sleep late. So it's like, you got to constantly remind yourself. Yeah. I'm trying to be a 5 a.m. guy, but it's like, it's hard. So I also wanted to ask you what you think about, you know, you were talking about your writing process. Like, have you kind of entertained the idea or using any technology, AI, like, you know, your thoughts on those type of tools? I've never used it. I'm not the kind of person who's like, AI is the devil. Right. I don't think that is true. I think it's a tool. Right. I think you can feel it when you read something. Like, I think people are relying on it too much. When I personally receive something I can clearly see someone has like, you know, ChatGPT, I'm like, I can see that. And it's soulless, you know, like if you're going to use it,
and then craft it out of that.
Yeah.
Like if that's your pile,
yeah.
and then you craft it out of that, I can understand. Not more for work, I think. I personally, I have an aversion. I don't even know where to go to use it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think this is a writer's thing. Like, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use any of that. But again, I don't think that it's like people who are using it are crazy. I think it's not going away.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, we're not.
Yeah,
we just have to
I always love asking every type of creative because it kind of affects every field.
Yeah.
And there's always like either you're on the fence about it or like you love it and it's helped or like it's the death of everything but I think there's like a middle ground where my belief is that if you're already talented now, and especially like what you just said, like you can tell when things are soulless. So like if you're able to now use that and you have good taste, like you almost stand out even more. Yeah. Because now there's like so much of people using it or people like just vomiting whatever. Yeah. So like I think like I heard someone say like the taste is like what the future is. Yeah. Like how can you separate your taste from others or like from soulless creative, which is like AI.
Yeah, and it's like how you put the things together, how you like how you're threading the narrative together, so you might have, it's like, I was talking today about this, about how like we have so much information and like there's so much information out there, but you're getting all this like flat, fast information. But as a storyteller, what you have to do is actually like dig deep behind all that information and then start to make knowledge of it and like start to thread things together, start to make stories, start to understand the past, start to create a present, start to build a future. You know what I mean? Like all of that is the thing that you're actually doing, which is a lot of work anyway. Yeah. That doesn't mean you're not going to use technology.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're going to use it.
Yeah. Now, I was actually about to ask you, like, how do you structure your story? How do you tell your story? Like, what makes a good story?
Yeah. God.
I know that answer could be, you know.
I mean, I think there's basic things that everybody uses, and like, there's like 3-part structures, and there's, whatever, all the things that people use. But I think that at the end of the day, you learn all of that. You see what works. You look at classic storytelling arches and like, beginning, middle, ends, and like climax and this, and how to create an ending and all of these things. And then you're like, okay, but at the end of the day, they're really, especially when you're dealing with things like a novel or anything, there's really no rules. Do you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, there are all the rules and there are no rules, because you can always kind of like break a little over here and then do something new and add that to this part over here. And then it's like, okay, you're actually building a new thing, and then you make it and you're like, oh, I think I've seen that before. You know what I mean? It's like... Yeah,
I love that though, because I think we kind of, now that you said it like so eloquently like that, like we kind of try to do that here, and everything we do, we're like, all right, like I know this is the way you do it, but like what if we just had a different take on it and then see what happens? And I think that's where like cool stuff comes from. Like, it's not the same old, but you can see like some sort of take of something familiar or whatever. That's like writing to me is like how do you I'm so fascinated. Like you're talking about novels, but how do you, like, you wrote Amparo, which I mean everyone here went and loved, and our great friend Robbie Ramos was a part of. How do you write for something like that, where it's like an immersive experience? Like it's not words coming at you, or like a film that people are saying the words. It's like almost all of it in one. Yeah. But then it's like in your face.
Yeah. So it's essentially like writing a gajillion stories. You know what I mean? Like I think that one of the things that people don't realize with true scripted... Okay, let me start here. Like immersive theater, at least the immersive theater that a lot of people knew before, sort of knew before we made Amparo, right? Like at that moment where it was popular, at least in New York and London, was a very British model, which was a model that didn't have a lot of words. It didn't have a lot of narrative. It had a lot of movement, and it had a lot of story that was based on something like Macbeth or whatever, something else. And so people went in sort of like knowing it's sort of about that, and it's visual, and it's like, you know, like all these bodies moving, and you like, why? Because you have all these worlds colliding in space, and it's very hard to have 70 million stories uniting.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is actually where technology is could be very helpful, because you are literally creating a bunch of different lives. It's, for me, immersive theater truly, at least the way that like we're trying to make it with, and then when I say we, I'm like saying Abre Camino, which is my company that I have with my partner Victoria Collado. We do a lot of that, and the idea is actually it's the closest thing to life, like to being alive, that we have, because you go to a stage and it's like, okay, yeah, but the stage is over there in a proscenium. It's like it's standing there, right? But
you know where you are.
Yeah, but if you are here and it's like, we always said that Amparo was like, I like to say, you're at a party and you could go back to that show and see it 23 different times and you would see it differently each of those times. And it's like you go to a party and you stand in a different place the whole night, you have a totally different night. People at that party have such a different night. It's the same party. The same things happened, right? But they're very different nights happening. Do you know what I mean? So like you actually have to write all those nights, you know? So you have to like write the guy who's doing whatever he's doing in the bathroom and like do the one that's, you know, whatever, meeting the love of his life on the dance floor, and then whatever, you know, all the things, you know, having a midlife crisis or whatever, you know, like all those things are happening at the same time at any given moment. And so like that's the thing that's so hard, I think, and so exciting with immersive. And like for me, the thing that we're making right now, or the thing that I'm writing and Vicky's directing, is Steven's A Love Story, which is in a deli that Robbie was also in. And we did a pilot. So the other answer to what you're asking is like Amparo had 2 pilots before the thing that everybody saw here, right? Which taught us a lot. You know, they were 2 totally different systems. Like the first one was a pilot at Ball and Chain, which I call like this circular project because the space dictated that the movement was circular. And then the other one was in New York in a building that was narrow, and it became much more vertical. And so it was like up and down. And so then when you have Amparo, the one that ended up being here, those 2 worlds joined together and became what Amparo became. And I was writing it in Savannah.
Wow.
Like, I remember that it was like going and then talking to Vicky and being like, okay, here's our new space, right? And then I went home, I went to Savannah because I was living both in Savannah and Miami at that moment. And I remember like that in my head, I had like the paths happening at the same time. So I would be like, and I was like, how am I going to write this down? Like, how am I going to write it down? So then I wrote columns. Like,
oh yeah, that makes sense.
I just wrote columns all across the page. So then I would write like everything that was happening. And then if I knew there would be a gap, I would literally leave a space of time, like space, and then it would continue. And I like, this was my way of saying it. And it like, Vicky was like, please don't show the script to the actors. Please don't show this to the actors.
I mean, there's no blueprint for something like that.
There's not. So then when we got into production, it became like, okay, so then like Vicky, who's the director, was like, okay, what if we start to like hyperlink, you know what I mean? Like things for actors to be able to like get to their scene, and then essentially like building a system of how to put it on paper, which I feel like we still are tweaking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's probably a never ending process.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, like, how do you, because that's hard to test, because it's not like you shoot a pilot for a show and then like people can see it.
It's really hard to test. It's really hard
like
to
live.
test. And you have to be made of steel. You do, because like I feel like when you're like a young artist, you're like, oh my God. And like, then people are going to be like, oh, and you're like, I don't care. I just need to know what the next step is. You know what I mean? It's like, you're really like right now where I'm at is like, I just need to know how to make this thing and make it the best thing possible. I'm sorry, guys. You're the guinea pigs. Okay. Like, and some people don't understand that and will never understand that. They'll be like, what's happening? You know what I mean? Like they'll never get it.
But it's tough because like, it's not just the writing and then is a story good? Is like the performance good? Is like logistically, like, is this gonna work? Yeah. So it's like so many 100%. Parts you have to like account for. Yeah. So
and then sometimes the director's like, you remember that thing in your head that you thought was like gonna be 2 minutes? It's 10 minutes, and now you have a 10-minute gap, and now you like what happens in this whole part? You know what I mean? And you're like, okay, feels like an hour. Let's go. Let's write something there, and then she'll be like, okay, actor, you know, like there's a bunch of in the room stuff that happens also. I have learned that writing in the room is super fun for me. Like right there live. But I think that I got there in life. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like I started out.
You mean like while you guys are...
Yeah, like while we're working. Like I feel like my young self would have been like, okay, I will go home now and fix that. And I'll be back tomorrow. And now I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you don't want to be like exposed and like all these people. I'm like, here,
try it. And I just throw it at them.
This
like
is in the
there.
moment. Yeah. But you think it's easier to, but I mean, that story is kind of like everyone has like almost a direct tie to it in some way or form. Yeah. And it's just a true story. Like, is it easier for you to write something like that or something fictional or like make up a world or?
I enjoy a lot writing based on true story. Like at the end of the day, my PhD ended up being in creative nonfiction, which is like literary journalism, which is based on truth. So based on facts. So this Amparo at the end of the day was not nonfiction. It's based on a true story, right? Because there's fictionalized elements of the thing. I enjoy that the most. I love it. I also love making things up, but I feel like everything is sort of based on a true story.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like it didn't just come out of nowhere.
Even science fiction is like kind of.
Yeah, that's like, true.
In some, I don't know, metaphorical way. Whatever.
Yeah, no, it's like I get what you're saying. It's like a lot of science fiction is kind of based on like life, like what is life with a meaning, and they kind of derive from that idea. But you were just talking about like kind of, you know, working while you're in that collaborative space or whatever. Like, how do you take that like criticism, or like do you ever read any reviews, or have you had any like terrible ones? Or
I don't read reviews. To the point, this is really funny actually. I really don't read reviews. I think at some point I did, and then one day I was just like, this is not helpful, because no matter which way they go, they're not helpful. Meaning once you're at the review stage, if they're so praising, that could go to your head. If they tear it down, it's like, should that stop you? I don't know. You know what I mean? No.
Because it's after the fact.
You're done. Like,
that's true.
You wrote this so long ago. These people are now catching up to the thing that you did 2 decades ago. Who cares? You've moved on. Do you know what I mean? Like, you probably have come up with half of those things that they're saying. So you're like, whatever. This is not useful to me. That doesn't mean it's not useful to the conversation. That's why you wrote it. I'm not saying reviews shouldn't exist, to be clear. Like, you read them, do your thing, go talk amongst yourselves. That's fine. Yeah. I'm not going to read it because I need to keep writing. You know what I mean? That's a
good way to look at it. It's not constructive to you. Yeah. It's like, what am I going to do with this, good or bad?
But workshopping, I think, is super.
That's the correct word. I was
constructive. And like, I'll take all the feedback. Like, I will hear all that stuff. When we're in like workshop mode, like right now we just did that pilot. I'm like, tell me all the notes, all of them. Yes, you're right. Yes, no, yes, no. You know, like you take all of it. So it depends on the moment.
But have you ever like workshopped something and it's completely changed after the fact? Yeah. Or even maybe like you were like, maybe it wasn't a good idea?
I think things completely change 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, almost always. Like, for sure. Yeah.
Even for a book, how like that's a
Oh my God. My first novel, my first draft was 600 pages.
Oh my gosh.
It ended up being 200 and something. So just to give you an idea of like, you remove that much from something, you have to rehaul the whole thing. You know what I mean? So it's a whole thing.
But that's like you have editors and like.
Yeah. So with that one, that was a journey because. So that one at the end of the day was what I did for my master's thesis. And then I had someone who, her name was Mana Anse. She helped me a lot to understand editing, like self-editing. Like she made me be able to self-edit by editing me. Do you know what I mean? Like by helping me, leading me to all the questions. Like, do you really need all this? And what is this? And what are all the questions. And then I remember there was like these whole sections of the book, and she was like, maybe this is another book. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
It's a nice way to
this is you're right. This should leave. There's just like a lot of that I learned from that I still to this day I use. Also, one really fun editing experience that I had was when I first started working for newspapers. I was very young, and I was like, I want to be a columnist. And they were like, nobody cares what you have to say. You're like 20 years old. Like nobody, you can't. But come under our wing and we will, teach you the ropes. And I had a couple of journalists at the Miami Herald, and one of them who was in the neighbors section at the time, he was like, he gave me an assignment and eventually gave me a little column, 2 columns. In that section, and then I grew from there. But that first day, I remember he was like, I gave him something, and this was like in person. I gave him this like final piece, and he's like, okay, can you stand behind me? And I was like, sure. And it was like this like green computer, you know what I'm talking about, like old school, think the 80s. Yeah. It wasn't the 80s, but it looked like that. And he was like, okay. And he started to like slash, cut, arrange. Like I was standing right behind him, and I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I was freaking out internally. I was trying not to show it on my face. Although like somewhere, like if someone would have pushed a little like harder, there would have been a tear rolling out, but I was like holding it, and I was like, okay. And he was, but watching him do that, it has never left me. Like he knew exactly what he was doing by showing me how he was editing. Like he literally was like, just stand behind me. He was the nicest person. He only did that once, and he never had to do it again. Like that, he just asked me a bunch of questions and this and that, but like it was formative.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we need to allow that,
Yeah.
He destroyed my thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it was.
Let it open your brain.
It was open heart surgery. You know what I mean? But at least I had a freaking pulse after.
I mean, how important do you? I mean, maybe he wasn't a mentor in that aspect, but like our mentors like that, especially in writing, like.
I think they are, and it's so funny because if you would have told me when I was younger, like go find a mentor, I would never have been able to find one. Like I see those kids that they're like, and now I'm going to find my mentor. And I'm like, how do you do that? I don't know,
Like how to find a mentor in 5 steps. Like Jeez. I see those on YouTube and I'm like, what? Like,
yeah. How? I don't think that works. I sort of stumbled into them. And I feel like the thing is saying yes. Like to my first mentor, I said no the first time, And then God was like, are you sure? You really should take him up on this. And then I did. And then I think the same thing happened, over and over. And I was like, I want to call him. And they're like, no, but you know what? You get this. And that was a mentor. And then I want this. Here's this person. Wow, that's a mentor. Yeah. Like that woman that I said, the writer for my MFA program, my dad died the day before I entered my MFA program.
Oh my gosh.
It was a madness. But she there was something about her that connected in that moment, and again, that led to her. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
so like
you gotta be open to
it.
Have to be They're like everywhere. It's just you don't see them.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you like? I don't know the correct term, but like, do you use muses or inspiration for some of your work, or?
I feel like there's subjects like obsessions.
Yeah, it could be.
Like I feel like for me it's obsessions. Like I'm like obsessed, and then I can't get over it. You know what I mean? And I like can't get over it, and I can't get over it, and I can't get over it, and I know that I can't get over it because I have to figure it out. So then I just like keep going, and I really like my mom. Sometimes she's like, "Hi, Vanessa." It's like annoying to people, you know. But it is what allows me to do the thing that I do. I think.
No, for sure. But I think, I mean, I kind of have that personality too. But it's like, it's a good thing because it's like you get so excited and then you kind of go like all in.
Yeah.
And it's like,
do you have one right now? Like one specific one?
I'm trying to, I have a couple.
Yeah.
Well, I think right now actually is probably like kind of this, like creating and content. Like I've been more kind of diving into it and like not just all right, we're doing a podcast, like all right, what happens after the podcast, like how's this clip doing, like all right, if I change the caption, if I change the copy on it, like what's it gonna do, like should I do this? Like before I was just like I just want to do it, but I think I've been kind of diving more into like how to, like what's the whole process like, you know. And then that makes me want to do them more because then I want to find out, like, all right, like, what did I learn on the last one? Let me apply it on this episode. And then,
that's so fun.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a healthy obsession, but then I get a couple too many and then it's like, all right, you need to chill. Like, do you have, like, any advice you would give to, I guess, someone that's interested in writing or, like, me? Specifically?
I mean, it depends what kind of writers, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, I don't know. If it's like...
I just want to write better. That's my goal. I
feel like okay, I'm going to say a couple things because for some reason this popped into my brain. Well, number one, I feel like reading is everything. Like just reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. There's something about that it just like, it's like osmosis. It like gets inside of you and it becomes you. You know what I mean? Like it morphs, like you read all these people and then they morph and they're you when they come out. You know what I mean? Like it's like
I think, I mean, yeah, because I've recently gotten more into reading the last couple of years, like purposely, like I want to read more, and I guess that has something to do with why I'm more into writing, because I'm starting to read these different authors and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like I don't talk like that. Why don't I talk like that?
It's all these voices. It's so exciting. The other thing that I remember doing when I was like it was ninth grade. I remember I had just gone to ninth grade. I don't know why I remember this so much. I think I had so much fun doing it that it was also kind of these little formative moments. I was like, one of my teachers assigned an essay, and I was like, okay, I actually want to write a really good essay about this, and I really want to think about it. And I remember opening a thesaurus, and every time I was going to write something, and I was like, I've used this word 100,000 times in my life. And this was like when thesauruses were like, so I was like, okay, what else could I say here? And then I did that for like, I remember spending so long that I remember it was like late night by the time I was done. And I was like, oh my God, so many hours just went by. I did none of the rest of my homework. But that was so much fun. And I just lost myself in it. You know what I mean? And then the teacher came back and was like, what the?
Your vocabulary.
She was like, this is amazing. But it gave me a huge gift. You know what I mean? And it was like, I feel like I don't know if my kids are going to do that, but I'm going to like at some point show them that. Because then I had one other moment in college where one professor was like, have you guys ever really looked at the OED, at the Oxford English Dictionary? This is so dorky. And I was like, no, I have not. And I did the same thing, but with the OED, which is like a thesaurus and dictionary on speed, because it's like, you know, origins. And I was like, whoa, everything is so much deeper than I thought. It's because I did the reverse where I like took a text and I looked up every word in the OED, but I looked up every word and their origin. So I was like, oh my God, this is so meaningful. It blows your mind. Like how we speak it comes from such depth. You know what I mean? And it's like across oceans, across boundaries, across generations, across cultures, from freaking Mesopotamia to Cuba. And you're like, whoa, amazing. So like, I don't know. I didn't answer your question.
No, but I mean, it goes back to what we said in the beginning of the podcast, that like writing's so like underappreciated, but like literally, if it wasn't for the writing that the first person ever wrote on with a piece of wood on a tablet in wherever, you know, AD, AC, BC, like we wouldn't be here talking, because like that whole language would have never evolved to this, to that, and we would have never known what happened in the past and this and that. So like it's literally has shaped the world, but like we forget. Yeah. Because like that's our history. Like that's how we know anything of anything. It's insane. So I like to leave my guests with always this last question. What does creativity mean to you?
I mean, I feel like it's life. Like literally life, like it's making things. I think this all goes back to, for me, like I think I understood I think I thought I understood creativity, and then I became a mom, and then I was like, oh, it's all connected. Going back to connections, you know what I mean? But it's like, oh, this is actually what it means. And my kids are adopted, so I didn't actually make the life, you know what I mean? So it's not even that basic what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying? It's like, what is that creative wellspring? I feel like it's in all of us. Like we actually are built to make things in order to survive. Like that is part of our Darwinian instinct. It's not just this fluffy, froofy thing. It's actually the thing that keeps us alive, keeps us human, and keeps us like next to level. You know what I mean? It's sustainable and like saving, you know? So I don't know. I think it's a big deal.
Me too. That's why we're doing this podcast. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for coming by. If you have anything you want to plug, your social media, your new play you're doing,
I guess you can see everything on two things, which is my social media is at Vanessa Garcia Writer, mostly on Instagram, although it spreads to the others. And my website usually has some stuff, although I'm always behind on it, but it's my name, vanessagarcia.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you.